All right, imagine this. You're standing in the Sahara Desert, right? Sun beating down on you, just sand as far as the eye can see.
Sounds peaceful.
Right. But here's the thing, under that sand,
Oh.
there could be unexploded landmines left over from World War II. Can you even imagine a huge tank battle right there? Just crazy to think about, you know?
Yeah, it's amazing how a place can hold so much history even when it looks, well, kind of empty.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to be diving into today, the power of experiencing history and different cultures firsthand. We've got some really cool stuff to talk about. Interviews with this veteran journalist, Peter Snow, talking about his experiences, all over the world.
And what makes this even more interesting is that it's his son, the historian Dan Snow, who's doing the interviewing.
Right. So we get this like two-generation perspective. It's pretty amazing. So Peter started out in 1962. Think about that. No internet, no smartphones. Can you imagine trying to report on like the Vietnam War with none of that?
Yeah. It's mind-blowing, right? He had to fly film canisters back to London for developing. I mean, talk about trust.
Wow. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, did that slower pace change how the news was reported back then?
That's a good point. Maybe they had more time to like think things through.
Yeah, instead of this constant rush for breaking news we have now. Anyway, back to Peter. The guy was in some crazy situations: Vietnam, the fall of the Berlin Wall, China during the Cultural Revolution.
Yeah, I read about his Vietnam experience. Kind of surreal, huh? Flown into these fire bases, but he never actually saw any, actual fighting.
Yeah, it's almost like a weird controlled tour of a war zone. Shows you how much the military was managing what reporters could see.
Totally different from how we see war today, with videos and images coming straight from the front line.
Oh, absolutely. It's a whole different world now. And speaking of history happening right in front of you, the fall of the Berlin Wall. Can you imagine that?
Oh, yeah, I read about this one. He was actually in East Berlin doing a live broadcast when his colleague runs in with a piece of the wall. Crazy.
Like a chunk of history just falls into their laps. And what does Peter do?
Yeah.
Tries to climb the wall himself.
He didn't.
Yep. Doesn't make it, though. Blames it on getting old, but you can tell he was just caught up in the moment.
Oh, that's amazing.
Right. And then there's China in 72, just as it's starting to open up to the West.
A totally different world then, I bet.
Oh, yeah. Peter talks about seeing thousands of people digging a canal by hand. It really hits you how much things have changed in such a short time.
That's an image that really sticks with you, for sure.
And it's really cool hearing about how all of Peter's experiences influenced his son, Dan.
Yeah, Dan, right. He's a historian now.
Exactly. And he talks about this turning point, filming a documentary with his dad in Egypt about the Battle of El Alamein in World War II.
Oh, wow. On the actual battlefield.
Yep. And Dan says, even though the desert looks empty, being there, physically being in that spot, it just brought history to life.
I can imagine. It's one thing to read about a battle, but to actually stand where it happened.
Totally. And Dan talks about the heat, the sun beating down, how even little ridges in the land played a part in the fighting.
Wow, details you'd never get from a book.
Exactly. And then there's this one part, he's talking about the unexploded landmines still scattered around.
Oh, man. That sends chills down your spine, Makes it real.
For sure. And it kind of proves Dan's point, right? That even in our digital world, nothing beats experiencing things firsthand.
He's got a point. You can watch all the documentaries you want, but it's not the same.
Right. And Dan takes it even further. He learns about Viking navigation by sailing on a reconstructed Viking ship, using, all natural materials for repairs.
Wow, that's hardcore. Talk about immersive learning.
Haha, right. And get this, he even tries smoked fish prepared with reindeer droppings, a traditional Viking method.
Whoa, okay. That's maybe a little too immersive.
Haha. But it proves his point, doesn't it? It's about getting your hands dirty, engaging all your senses.
It's about connecting with the past, with the different cultures, in a way that just sticks with you.
Absolutely. And he talks about sailing across Europe with his family, showing his kids all these different places and cultures.
It's about opening their eyes to the world, showing them how big and diverse it is.
Exactly. And for Dan and Peter, too, I think travel is about more than just seeing sights. It's about becoming more empathetic.
More understanding of other people, other ways of life.
Right. And that's something we could all use a little more of these days.
Definitely. Especially in a world that feels, increasingly divided.
I know not everyone can just, jet off to another country.
Yeah, that's true. Does that mean they can't have these kinds of experiences?
Not at all. Dan talks about how even small trips can make a difference. Visiting a local museum, Going to a cultural festival in your town?
Oh, I like that. It's about being a traveler in your own backyard.
Exactly. Or even just striking up a conversation with someone from a different background, hearing their story.
It's about opening ourselves up to new experiences, new perspectives.
Right. And who knows, maybe those little steps will lead to bigger adventures down the road.
Just like Peter's adventures inspired Dan. Love that.
Mm.
Man, both Peter and Dan's stories are just, I don't know, really inspiring. But it makes you think, like, what about those of us who can't just, travel the world? Do we miss out on all this?
That's where I think this idea of being a traveler in your own backyard comes in, you know?
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. Like, what if you went to a local museum? You'd be surprised at the history hiding right there in your own town.
Yeah. It's about looking at things with fresh eyes,
Yeah.
seeing the history all around us.
Totally. Or, hey, have you ever been to one of those, like, cultural festivals, the ones they have downtown sometimes?
Oh, yeah, those are always fun. Get to try different foods, hear music you've never heard before.
Exactly. And you don't even need to go anywhere. Just talking to someone from a different background, hearing their story, it can be like a mini adventure in itself.
You're right. It's those little connections that, remind us how diverse the world is.
And how much we all have in common, too.
Absolutely. So, to all our listeners out there, we'll leave you with this. What's one thing you can do today to be a traveler, even if it's just in your own community? What journey are you going to take, big or small? Go out there and discover something new, connect with history, experience a different culture. You never know what you might find. And that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.